We all know who Steve Jobs was and what he meant for our world. In his relatively short life, this man changed the world as we know it. But Jobs didn't have an easy life at all. In fact, his path to success was full of bumps, detours and falls. This is the story of how the biggest names sometimes come from the most unlikely backgrounds. He was born in San Francisco in 1955. His biological mother, Joanne Schieffel, was an unwed graduate student. She decided to give up her child for adoption. Steve Jobs was then adopted by Paula and Clara Jobs, who had no idea that they were adopting a future tech icon. He grew up in the suburbs of San Francisco and was described by his adoptive sister as a curious child who liked taking things apart just so he could understand how they worked. When he was 13, Jobs returned to his biological mother to find out why she gave him up for adoption. He discovered that she was an unwed graduate student who felt that she wasn't mature enough to raise a child. "I wanted to find my roots," he said later. "I wanted to know where I came from." At the age of 15, Jobs began attending Reed College in Portland, Oregon. It was there that he met Steve Wozniak, who would become his best friend and business partner. Unlike Jobs, Wozniak had a normal family with 2 parents and a sister. His father worked for a local water utility company. Despite coming from different backgrounds, the two formed an instant connection when they met in a class called People Are Exciting. In college, Jobs fell in love with calligraphy and spent time mastering the art form. This would later influence the design of Apple products such as the Macintosh, which featured a unique font and user interface that was unlike anything else on the market. He attended college for 1 year before dropping out. However, he continued to enroll each term to get access to campus facilities at the dining hall and dorm rooms. Eventually, though, the college caught on to what he was doing and revoked his access. The dropout rate at Reed College is around 4%, but in reality, Jobs barely even attended classes and instead hung around campus to eat in the dining hall and crash in the computer labs. Jobs eventually ran out of money and had to take up residence in an off-campus commune called The Farm. It was here that he lived out the stereotypical hippie lifestyle of the 1970s. He wore sandals and a necklace made of Indian rupees and slept on a mattress on the floor in a building with no electricity or running water. But Jobs was happy living this way. He told biographer Walter Isaacson that he was glad to have nothing to do with money. "I wanted to make enough so I could never have to worry about it again," he explained. After leaving Reed, Jobs went to India to try to learn more about himself, but after spending time with an ashram, he realized that it wasn't for him. When he returned to the United States, he found a job working at Atari, a popular electronics company of the era. He and Wozniak began talking about starting their own business together, but they weren't sure what to do. Jobs was browsing the classified ads one day when he saw a listing for a graphics calculator called the HP 65. He bought one and soon figured out that he could program it to play games. At the same time, Wozniak was tinkering with the circuit board and realized that he could use it to create a personal computer. The two decided to combine forces and create a computer that could display graphics. Wozniak designed the machine while Jobs came up with its look and feel. Jobs also came up with the name Apple Computer Inc. He explained to Wozniak that he liked the name because it sounded fun, friendly and approachable. "We wanted something that was approachable and easy to say," Wozniak confirmed in an interview. "It seemed like a good name." They got a lot of help from their friend Steve Gary, who designed the first Apple logo. The trio then set about building the first Apple computers in Jobs' garage. They assembled the parts by hand and programmed them using a teletype machine. Once they were finished, they took their computers to a local store called the Byte Shop to see if anyone was interested in buying them. The owner of the Byte Shop was impressed with the quality of the machines and agreed to sell them. The first computer that Jobs and Wozniak built sold for $40. It may not sound like much, but considering that they had put in only a few hours of work, it was a pretty good return on investment. Plus, the experience gave them a lot of confidence that their business could succeed. The next step was to develop a marketing plan for their computers. Jobs was in charge of this aspect of the business. He believed that the key to success was creating a product that was both innovative and easy to use. That's why he named their first product the Apple line. It was a bare-bones machine that required the user to supply their own keyboard, monitor and other peripherals, but Jobs believed that the price tag of $665 made it a bargain, and he was right. The Apple I sold out quickly, which gave Jobs and Wozniak the confidence to expand their business. They hired a friend from Atari named Rob Janov as their first employee. Together, the three of them worked on developing the Apple II, which would become one of the best-selling personal computers of all time. Like the Apple I, the Apple II was built in Jobs' garage, but it was a much more polished product. It came with a color graphics display, a keyboard and 2 floppy disk drives. It also featured a built-in modem, which allowed users to connect to the fledgling internet. All of these features made the Apple II a hit with consumers and businesses alike. Within 2 years of launching the Apple II, Jobs and Wozniak had built a multi-million-dollar business. In 1977, they took their company public, which made them both millionaires overnight. But despite their success, Jobs knew that he needed to step up his game. He had big plans for Apple, and he needed a team of talented people to help him execute them. So Jobs did something that few CEOs are willing to do. He brought in people smarter than him to fill key positions at the company. For example, he hired John Sculley as Apple CEO. Sculley was a marketing genius who had previously worked at Pepsi. He helped Apple grow from a small startup to a global brand. Jobs also hired Mike Markula, a former Intel executive, to serve as Apple's chief financial officer. With the help of these experienced professionals, Apple was able to continue growing at a rapid pace. But as the company grew, so did Jobs' ego. He became increasingly controlling and difficult to work for. In 1984, he was forced to resign from Apple after a power struggle with Sculley. Although he was no longer CEO of Apple, Jobs still owned a significant amount of the company's stock. So he wasn't exactly hurting for cash, but Jobs was restless. He started a new company called Next Inc. and developed a new type of operating system called Next Step. Unfortunately, the market wasn't ready for either the new company or the new OS. As a result, Jobs was forced to lay off most of Next's employees and slash the price of its computers in order to stay afloat. But Jobs wasn't done yet. In 1986, he founded another company called Pixar. This time he focused on creating computer animation software. The first product was a set of animation tools called the Graphics Group. The tools were used to create the special effects for the movie The Abyss in 1989. This led to a partnership with George Lucas and the creation of the first Toy Story movie in 1995. Throughout all of this, Jobs remained a private person. He was notoriously difficult to get an interview with and rarely gave interviews in the first place. When he did speak to the media, he was often cryptic and evasive. This only added to the mystique surrounding Jobs. Many people saw him as a genius who was ahead of his time. In the late 1990s, Jobs began to fade from the public eye. He had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and was given only a 7% chance of survival. But Jobs refused to give up. He underwent an experimental surgery, removed the tumor, and then began a regimen of alternative medicine. Jobs' health eventually improved and he was able to return to work. In 1997, he was invited back to Apple to oversee the development of Mac OS X. The new operating system featured a sleek user interface that Jobs had been working on at Next. Apple executives hoped that Jobs' involvement would breathe new life into the Macintosh line of computers, and they were right. Mac OS X was a huge hit and helped Apple regain its position as a leader in the computer industry. But Jobs' relationship with Sculley was strained. The two had butted heads in the past and Sculley had never forgiven Jobs for his behavior. When Jobs tried to take over Apple again in 1997, Sculley resigned as CEO and retired from the company. Jobs was back in charge at Apple, but this time he was a changed man. He was more humble and more open to feedback from others. He surrounded himself with a new team of advisors, including Tim Cook, who would become CEO of Apple in 2011. Under Jobs' leadership, Apple released some of its most iconic products, including the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone and the iPad. These products made Apple the most valuable technology company in the world. On October 5, 2011, at the age of 56, Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer. He is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. His death was mourned by millions of people around the world. Steve Jobs was a complex and sometimes contradictory figure. He was a brilliant innovator who was also a control freak. He was a demanding boss who was also incredibly inspiring. He was a visionary who was also very down to earth. Most of all, he was a man who never gave up. Even when he was facing seemingly insurmountable odds, he kept going. And in the process, he changed the world forever. For more content, don't forget to subscribe.